Start off.
Am I audible to you?
Already started.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second day of 23rd World Education Summit 2022 School Education. And now we have the third panel discussion of the day, and the topic of the panel discussion is Evolution of IT and Sustainability, Building Digital Blueprint for Future School Campus. And we have some eminent panelists here. Before I start off, I would like to welcome all our panelists today. Our panelist includes Mr. Sudhir Kukreja, co-founder, President's International School. He's the moderator. Welcome, Mr. Kukreja. We have Ms.
Thank you.
Manju Priya Marisamy, founder, SKB Vidyashram School, Chennai. Welcome, ma'am. We have Dr. S.K. Rathod, founder, chairman, and managing director, Sanford Group of Schools. Welcome, sir. We have Ms. Meenakshi Ramesh, director, Wales Group of Institutions, Chennai. Welcome, ma'am. We have Mr. Francis Fernandez, Principal Asia English School, Ahmedabad. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
And we have Dr. Ahmed Razal, Executive Director, Tawheed Group of Educational Institutions, Udupi. Welcome, sir. I would now hand over the session to Mr. Sudhir Kukreja, who is the founder of Credence International School and also the moderator. Over to you, Mr. Kukreja.
Thank you so much, Taranum. My heartfelt gratitude and thanks to the Elets team for arranging this platform, whereby I have the opportunity of hosting this August panel for our audiences. Truly humbled and honored to be hosting you all. A very warm welcome and good evening to all the panelists present here. Well, like Tarano mentioned, we all have gathered here to have a enriching discussion for each one of us to be talking about the technology, I think, which has probably become a part of our blood, maybe what we are eating, what we are sleeping over the last 2 years. And I think it's time we revisited the kind of technologies that we are using across our schools and the education fraternity. The kind of growth that we've seen in terms of education in the last two education and technology adoption in the last 2 years is something that has been unprecedented. So while all the challenges that we've faced in these last 2 years of pandemic, I believe there has been a certain sense of achievement across the education fraternity, that the teaching fraternity has really come up to the challenge. The kind of transformation that we've seen in the last 2 years was something which was probably unimaginable maybe over the next 2 decades also. So I think looking at the positive side of the things, this is what has been our takeaway in terms of what we've kind of learned from this entire pandemic and the technology growth that has happened across the schools in India. What I'm really going to have, as a discussion with our August panelists over here is their views on what is going to be the technology as we go ahead, as we go back to our physical schools, as kids are coming back to the beloved campuses, and of course we've re-established the human bond that we've always shared across our schools. Uh, I think I'd like to start the discussion with Ms. Meenakshi Ramesh, who's the head of Wales Group of Schools. Ma'am, I'd like you to throw some light on what kind of technology do you see, playing a critical role in a long-term sustainable environment going forward from here. Of course, we've kind of experimented with a lot of technology tools in the last 2 years, but maybe the era of the Zoom calls and the Google Meets is over, and we now that we are back to the school classroom, what are the aspects of technology that you think are going to remain, with the children, with the teachers, and across the system? Ma'am, you're on mute apparently.
Thank you, Mr. Sudhir Kukreja, for giving us all this opportunity of unlearning and relearning every time there is a demand, there is a necessity. And I think as educationists, we all agree that we were all pushed to be only using the tools at one time during the pandemic, and that was the only way of communicating. Though we talk so much about having a socio-emotional learning as a component that cannot be compensated, and when you talk about the tool that would still sustain by itself, and the very definition and meaning of the term tool is something that aids, that helps us in doing our work easier. Like we have the simple machine tools, even IT or whatever the media that we use, the apps that we use, or the digital platforms that we use, that is going to be one of the aiding tools for us all. And now, after 2 years, when almost the scenes are little different and children have started coming back to school, people are a little worried about the kind of acquaintance of knowledge and skills that they should have had amidst all these advancement in technology, though it replaced to some extent that we could deliver the content, and somewhere we still find that it is not up to the mark of what it should be in terms of the knowledge and skills that they should have acquired during a regular physical schooling. I think many researchers have gone into this and they have said that there is a regression, which means there is a learning gap, there is a learning loss, because we have not given them enough time to even recall and retain the informations, though we were all with the tools all the time. Now, going ahead, I think it's going to be inseparable from all of us that these tools have to really help us in terms of making children, giving room for enhancing skills like we call the 21st century skills, the soft skills, where they need to communicate, they need to analyze, they need to interpret, debate, discuss, research, and all this can be done ahead of the time in what we all of us know and call as the blended learning, where we can give the information to the children beforehand. There could be humongous information, but during a physical transaction, as a teacher, as a facilitator, as a moderator, if we are able to confine that more for collaborative learning discussions, and we set a routine pattern of thinking and make them self dependent and independent learners, and I think all these tools will become a part and component of, I think I'm going to cover almost all the questions that were posed there, where it is going to bring in a change in the curriculum, the delivery pattern. The teachers will know how to develop a content in terms of using this tool as an aid, apart from her getting connected to the subject, taking them to levels of acquisition of all the skills that would make them even reaching towards helping what we call the sustainable goals. I think the very topic that you have given is development of IT and sustainability. Now I am looking at the sustainable development goals with reference to the IT tools, to education. How do we make that component benefit the commerce as well as education as an industry? I think we have learning platforms now, LMS solutions available, and media for sending messages, the broadcast group, the podcast group, the apps for to develop all the skills. I think we need to have a blend of all this with little bit of our own creativity and innovativeness, which can be tried out even on using these apps to some extent, and also like the art form and the story selling sessions, which can never be replaced via the media, and it is something that we have to do physically in any environment. And I think keeping in line with NEP, there is a lot to be learned, a lot to be done in terms of what we call as augmented reality that is pervading everywhere. Of course it's going to benefit, and then it is how we are going to make use of all this as blockchains and how we can modify. So there is no end or limit to qualify ourselves from what is required at the basal level for a child to be learning at in an ordinary school. If that is an ordinary video sessions, let that be done ahead of the time. Resources are downloadable in small chunks. That can be used. It is up to the teacher finally to have a transdisciplinary, and also the skills have to be integrated, for which I think even for training all these, this is my first version of impression on bringing this as a blended learning.
That's truly remarkable, ma'am, coming from a veteran. I believe that more than the opening remark, that sounds like a complete essence of the entire discussion that maybe all of us need to, have our thoughts on. That very beautifully sets the tone, right? I believe, what I'll pick up from your words is that we've entered a space which is completely endless. An education institution or education as a job is completely, an evolutionary process. And I believe the kind of evolution that we've had in the last 2 years, it's just the beginning. And like you very rightly said, we need to capitalize on each of these things and make sure that, we have a beautiful blend of all these things. Of course, NEP has chalked out another roadmap altogether. I'll come back to that in the later half of my discussion. But before that, I think I'll go back to Dr. Amjad. Dr. Amjad, your opening remarks, how do you see these technologies that we've experimented with in the last 2 years? How do you see these things being implemented going forward?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sudhir. What I would like to add over here, basically, so things Meenakshi ma'am has already covered. But from my side, what I want to add to this is when I see about this, when I talk about this evolution. So what I see is evolution has already started many years ago. When you see the schools, especially cities, and also when you compare the data with the rural India, so the evolution began many years ago. Now that 2 years ago, what we did, that was a massive transition because we had no other option but to teach the students in one way or the other way. So that is why all the schools, especially if you see in cities also, I'm from Hyderabad, so I can tell you, I can quote some examples from Hyderabad too. There are schools where you find amazing infrastructure, especially when you talk about IT. But at the same time, there are other schools where there is an IT lab, but there is no internet connection. At the same time, when there are schools where there is no IT lab at all. So these are the schools when they wanted to educate the students. So they immediately plunged into action and they started asking the teachers and they started the classes online. So I think this is what I wanted to add. But lastly, if I say that there are challenges all the time, especially when you talk about the evolution, and when again the second part of this topic is about sustainability. So I think it's going to be a very big question, especially to the schools that are there already in the cities. I'm not denying the fact that there are schools which are really doing amazing work, especially when you talk about some top schools. But in some cities, in metro cities, also there are schools where there is no such infrastructural facility. So there are literally challenges, and I think that maybe India needs a few more years where this education or the sustainability can make true sense in the coming years.
Well, that's truly the challenge, I think, what we all have, sir. It's about sustaining the growth. What we've done in the last 2 years is something that we were completely forced into. But yes, we've lived up to the challenge. We've come up with, maybe in flying colors across the industry, whether it was the metro cities or the small cities, whether it was the CBSE schools or the government schools, or maybe to an extent the Anganwadis that we have in the rural areas. Everybody has probably done a commendable job. And how do we, take this growth forward is what is going to be the real challenge. I'd like to come to Dr. S.K. Rathod. Mr. Rathod, I think you bring to the table a vast experience of a complete network of preschools, and I believe that was one segment of the education frame which was the probably one of the worst affected, right? And I think that is where we've had the maximum amount of impact. I think that's where we've had the maximum amount of education loss, where the children growth have suffered. Uh, do you think there is going to be a new blended model for these kids where we are still having maybe some bit of COVID things still looming over, and maybe there are certain things, and now that the kids are coming back to the school after 2 years, would there be any kind of customization required or any kind of a blended approach required to make these children make up for the losses that have happened in the last 2 years?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sudhir. Sudhir, I was talking on the same thing yesterday also in Hyderabad. You and me both were there. So
Absolutely.
I tell you, the preschool sector, which is a sector where even the teachers are not so tech savvy, because in our case, teachers are not so much trained. uh, Teachers in preschools are the girls who are waiting for the marriage to happen, Before that, they will have to work somewhere, or the ladies who left their corporate jobs to handle their family situation. Most of the teachers, not everyone. So it is very difficult. Before 2 years back, it was very difficult to make them understand how to use technology. बहुत मुश्किल होता था उन्हें समझाना कि टेक्नोलॉजी यूज करो. इवन आई जस्ट वांटेड टू शेयर, Sanford was the first preschool chain we launched 12 years back with touch screen panels and all that. When at that point of time we imported the panels, and it was very difficult for us to make the teachers understand how to use it. But all of a sudden, 2 years back, I don't know from where the courage in the teachers came, and where the motivation came, and they themselves come forward, and they are the I can say they are the role models for me also now. Because the teachers, हम जिनके लिए सोचते थे कि यार ये तो केवल बच्चों को हैंडल करने के अलावा कुछ नहीं कर सकते हैं, वो उन्होंने पूरा एजुकेशन सिस्टम प्री स्कूल सेगमेंट में चेंज करके रख दिया across the country, not only in any brand or single brand or two brands or any. So I just wanted to tell you, see the kind of work edtech company did for preschools also. No edtech company was doing much work for preschools. This is a very small segment. Even the fee structure is not so high in preschools. So most of the preschools were not able to meet out the expenses if they are having any technology involved in their system. So, but during the pandemic, many of the edtech company come out with a solution for preschoolers also at at some cost definitely. But so the problem is not with the preschools what we owns, or schools what the people like you and me have, or madam, or Mr. Francis or Mr. Amjad have. The problem is with the people, with the schools who are running in rural areas. The problem is with low cost K-12 schools and Anganwadis. And I just wanted to share, I met some secretary of one state of who is in charge of this woman and child welfare ministry. Anganwadi falls under her. So I just discussed with her, ma'am, what happened with the children of your Anganwadi? In that state, there are some more than 30,000 Anganwadis. So I just wanted to know कि उन बच्चों की education का क्या हुआ 2 साल में? Nothing happened. Nothing happened means nothing happened because the kind of manpower they have, the kind of infrastructure they have, they can't deliver the education during this pandemic time, and they can't afford. Because in case of government, if they wanted to have anything, even the pencil is required, they have to go for the tendering. So this is the situation. So we need to talk about the larger part of the country, because we are in all the conferences, all the webinars, we talks about the schools who are well off, who can afford the technology, who can afford any infrastructure to add on. But the budget preschools, budget schools, Anganwadis, rural area schools, even the government schools. The problem is with those children who are studying there, they also have right of the quality education. That is the problem. So I tell you, in preschool segment, see, we just launched our Sanford curriculum 2.0. So that is named as San Meta, with augmented reality, based on augmented reality. So child can experience the objects coming out of their books in their classroom, and even at home also. So this kind of experience for young children is required. What they can feel, what they can understand, what they can play. Gamification of education at early year age is required. So we have transformed all of our content, all of our books in gamification. In last 2 years, we did all these works. So I believe, as NEP says, till grade 2, the study should be in the playway method. So this is the real playway. If child is not allowed to go out because of pandemic, or in Delhi NCR because of pollution, Every year, 1.5 months, schools are asked to shut down because of pollution in November, December. Or if any riots happen, schools are asked. Schools are the first thing to close down because of anything. So in that case, also our system should be ready with technology which can give child real life experience sitting at home also. So I think these 2 years have taught us कि टेक्नोलॉजी जो कि हम 10 साल आगे भी नहीं सोच पाते, वो टेक्नोलॉजी हमने पिछले 2 सालों में सभी लोगों ने अपने अपने सिस्टम में इन्वॉल्व किया. थैंक यू सुधीर.
That's true. And I'm completely in sync with your thoughts, sir, where you say that a larger perspective is needed. Of course, we are a country of 1.2 billion people. And of course, there are different segments of the society which need different approach, which need different assistance, maybe different technologies at different level. And I believe we'll probably need to have different forums and different topics and different dedicated time periods for us to address each one of those things. Uh, I'd like to come back to the discussion where we were actually, talking about technology in the new age systems. NEP has, of course, given a new roadmap. I'm sure governments are working towards enabling those things in the next. Of course, it's a long-term vision document which should probably be coming alive in the next 1, 2, or 3 decades. I'd like to come to Mr. Francis and request him to throw some light on what should be the focus of the schools when we are trying to adopt new tools, when we are expected to follow NEP route map. Think of subjects like coding, things of subjects like robotics, things of making things a lot more. And of course, Mr. Rathore has talked about augmented realities and data sciences becoming a part of our school system. So these are the next age technologies which anyways have made inroads into the corporate systems. But when and how do we make them a part of our education system at the school level? I think that's the biggest question we have. And I believe today we as education fraternity are far more sensitized and ready to acknowledge the need for technology integration than we were probably ever before. So in one such scenario where the mindset is ready, where the adoption has taken place, right, how do you make sure that the right tools are assessed, right tools are integrated, and of course the implementation is the key?
So when it comes to these new age technologies, as we call them, for example, coding or digital literacy or understanding of technology, when we have already been penetrated or been put into a situation where we have technology all around us, all that we can do is, even our conference today has turned into a virtual summit, which used to be an affair where we used to meet each other and we used to have a huge gathering of people. When we talk about putting coding or getting coding and other related technologies into our curriculum, I don't think it is a big task right now with so many companies coming into it, whether we call White Hat Junior or all those kinds of companies. But again, one of the major things that we need to do is upskill our teachers in that segment. We need to move them away from our textbooks and put them into that kind of system wherein we ask them to use the internet and other forms wherein they give technology into the education system. For example, in my school, we have partnered with Google to give a Code to Learn program, and such programs are provided free by Google. And when we use this program, we run this program right from grade 3 to grade 8. Apart from being a platform that teaches them how to code using blocks, this program also helps them to connect other subjects using their storyboard software. So it is not only computers or IT that you're teaching them at that point in time. You're also teaching them English. You're also teaching them Hindi, mathematics, or whatever subjects that come into their curriculum. So right now, the implementation stage, what as schools, as principals, as CEOs, or whatever, wherever we are sitting, we need to understand that this technology has already come and try to put it into our system, not as a separate subject which is apart, but as a subject that is there, that is interdisciplinary. So that's where this technology will play a bigger role. That's what my thought on this is.
Well, I'm quite excited to hear this when you say that, okay, it's not a big deal. But I believe there is a complete transition that's taking place in the education system. Uh, I'd like to bring back Ms. Meenakshi into the discussion. Ma'am, I think from a very long time in our history, we've always been a teacher-led or a teacher-driven education system, right? And I think in the last 2 years, technology has taught us to maybe implement the flip model, turn students into self-learners. They've gone into different realms of life. They've explored topics and subjects and things on their own. And of course, technology like never before has enabled all this transformation. So, do you think we've come to a stage where the students need to learn to adapt a lifelong and a self-learning mechanism where teachers become a lot more as facilitators rather than the drivers of a limited amount of syllabus or the topics that are to be taught? And if so, then how equipped we are as an education system or as schools to implement this and bring about this transformation and make the entire learning process student driven rather than the teacher driven?
Mr. Sudhir, I think from what Dr. Amjit said and Mr. Francis and Dr. Rathod said, I think the rural-urban divide, it is a never-ending topic in our country. And as long as the systems are politicized, how much ever we talk about Diksha, Moksha with one digit, one platform, one pattern of learning and one source, I think it's going to take years for us to come to that. And apart from that, I think how we need to ask teachers, how do we encourage every child to become independent learner, a self-engaging learner, a responsible learner is very, very important. At the same time, using these tools, they do become very creative and they become innovative also. And it is up to the teachers to upskill to some extent, like how Mr. Rathod said, using an augmented reality. Sometimes they are pushed to be a little more creative, and that creativity is something at the center of innovation for everybody. And this can happen at the children level very fast because even as teachers, I think at this age of 65, I have learned a lot learning from my own teachers, my own students, in terms of even training. I have learned how I should be learning something more. And today's topic, in fact, made me choose on something which I was not very aware of into even at a shallow level. I said I would want to discuss on this topic because that is where I develop a curiosity, I develop an interest in delving deeper into the topic. So then, as a teacher, how do I pass this trait to my children? That is very important. Make them curious, make them self-engaged, make them self-innovative in their learning. And for this, I have to help them to have certain, pattern of thinking, a pattern of questions that they could ask themselves. And we call this some of the terms that all of us use, thinking about how to think. So I think unless we make a conscious effort to make the children reflect on their own learning, which can happen right from the age level of grade 1 to even at 1.5, 2.5, I think we can develop this as a very visible thinking pattern so that we understand that the child is now set to think this way. It's called as setting an environment where we have the courage to ask somebody even if we do not know. Even if we make mistakes, I should know that this teacher is not going to ridicule me. This person knows this resource better. How do I go and ask him that? How do I learn better? Does this fascinate me? Does this really have this wow factor? Have these kind of set pattern of questions for every child set even as a teacher or a facilitator for him to be answering as to how much do I know in this topic, how well can I relate this learning to my earlier learning, or do I do not know anything about this topic, how can I indulge into a self learning? If I were to indulge in a self learning, what is it that is going to direct me in terms of assuring that I have acquired these skills the right way? Is there an assessment pattern? I think with what Francis and Rathod said, and even Amjad said, we need to have certain self-assessment patterns for ourselves. As educators, if we are able to develop that within the boundaries and limits that we have in our hands, we can bring in a change to some extent. I do understand we cannot bring in a change all of a sudden for our country as such, but within the limits possible, as a facilitator, if I'm going to help a child to have these metacognitive processes, thinking routines, we call this thinking about thinking, and I need to set up such an environment in a classroom where oh, if this student is entering this teacher's classroom, he should feel, oh, this teacher will now help me to learn this. I can discuss with my peer will teach me, and there will never be an opportunity when the child is let down on any account as to that he's ridiculed for something, he's then branded saying he cannot do this. That is totally removed, and the child feels free that at any time I know this is the success criteria that I have to achieve. Self-learning modules that set a pattern for him even through modules of video clipping. It's like how I ensure that yes, I know this well, now I can proceed to the next band of learning, I can proceed to the next level, I can acquire the next level of acquisition of. So I always tell my teachers during my training, never have this good, very good, excellent or brand, have these nice color codes, have that from this amber I've gone to green, now I'm going to go to violet, indigo, blue, and then I form and with your through some set questions, through some assessment criteria, which has to have a standard. I think if as teachers we can implement and supplement all this in our small little videos or small little symphonies or through our simple training programs, which can be a part of the learning curriculum, I have every right, every opportunity to make myself a better self learner. So that will percolate to the teachers and to the students and make him more engaging, more responsible, and more creative and more innovative. And when the tools are with the children, they simply innovate, they create, and that paves way for being, high great problem solver. You call lateral thinking, you call critical thinking. He will come out with some tool and say, "Ma'am, this is the best tool. Can we adopt this in this class?" And give them that choice of bringing him in, roping him in, and see how best you can bring in all the schools nearby to begin with. Then, if we can do that for the schools within 5 kilometer radius to work collaboratively, then we think of spreading ourselves beyond. I think there is a responsibility with every individual as an individual, even to relate to UN sustainable developmental goals. When I talk about IT booming, where it has really made that no commerce or e-governance or education industry cannot survive without IT skills. And it is for us to understand how to bring this sustainability, even in terms of producing this education with equality, justice, and of course the right to acquire what is supposed to be given to everybody. If that IT can bring in with all the possible inputs slowly at every step, as the MP says, I think we have to lend our part very responsibly, and that would really, like tiny drops, they always make an ocean. It's like for us to realize our responsibilities and make the children responsible for their own learning through simple patterns of self-assessment techniques, self-assessment questions, and then say that, hey, I have done that. Wow factor should be there in every learning. The child should feel, hey, I am at now this level. I have crossed this band. I've I've caught this color of the whipcord. Now let's go to the next color of the whipcord, and rainbow is at the hand. That becomes his crown, and I think that is the way we have to be a facilitator, a guide, you be a co-learner, you be a peer, and motivate and have that little enthusiasm and have the transdisciplinary approach in learning more about the utilization of the tools. I always say it's not fidgeting about the tools, not knowing that I know all these apps, I know how to apply. It is never that. But in this generation, as teachers, we have to become agile thinkers, where you give more room for the children to discuss, debate, interact, whether it is in a physical environment or using a virtual platform. It is a self reflective learning that would help a child to become an independent learner and say, yes, I am proceeding, I am contributing, I am responsible, I am enjoying the journey as a learner. And this should be the attitude for all of us, even at any age, as a learner, continuous learner, independent learner.
Well, that was quite insightful, ma'am. I think so. My next question would be to Dr. Amjad and Dr. S.K. Rathore both. I think what ma'am has very beautifully laid down is what is the step-by-step path to executing it for an individual child. How does that child become into a self-learner and acquire this new methodology of teaching? But I think Dr. Amjad and Dr. Rathore, my question is to both of you, because you both operate a fairly large system of education with a large number of students in your systems itself and a large number of teachers as well. what ma'am has just laid out actually throws a big challenge in terms of an institutionalization of this process. Yeah. So this is the need of the hour. This is what we actually need to achieve in terms of the academic transformation. But my question to both of you as school leaders is, how do you institutionalize this? How do you make sure that the process to bring about this change goes down, maybe from top of the management to the teachers to the students? What kind of training needs would be there? And how do you actually set the process right, in terms of maybe the SOPs, in terms of maybe the deliverables, or the methodology of, completely changing the way we actually deal with the entire instructional design process in the school. Any of you can take a lead, and maybe I'd like to listen to both
Mr.
of their
Sudhir,
ideas. Yeah.
yeah, Mr. Sudhir, in your question itself, you have some of the points from my answer. So, but still, I'm going to talk about it. So basically, I come from, I have been to such schools where basically the teachers, for all these years, whenever we talk about technology, and whenever I personally told those teachers that you need to adapt this thing, and you have to teach the students using this technology. So in the beginning, what I witnessed with my school is they always took this IT or this modern style of teaching as an alien concept. So some of the teachers, they were trying, but there were some teachers who never paid attention to it, to that. Basically, maybe because they were very reluctant, and at the same time, they were not having that expertise. They were not knowing how to use it. And during that time, even we were not aware of facilities that we have now, that we have Google Meet, we have Zoom, we have StreamYard, we have so many other companies, and different applications. But that was a time when many of us, like maybe the education leaders, they were knowing all these things, but the teachers, they were not even looking into it in this modern technology. But at the same time, when this thing came, lockdown started, all the teachers, they had only one single thing to do, that they have to adapt this tool, consider this as a tool, and start teaching the students. Because if they are not going to use this, it will be very impossible for all those teachers to go to one and every in like each and every child's house and teach the student there itself. And collecting some students in a particular place and teaching them was also a big question. It was not allowed. So at that point of time, teachers understood that real need of this technology, and I'm telling you frankly, the real change started. And just to answer your question, how do we, in our schools, how do we implement that? So when lockdown was, even the government said that 20% of the students, they were supposed to come to school, and in some states it was like 30% of students, some 50%, some 70%. So 50% students, they were coming to school, and the other 50 was there at the house. So that is where the technology was brought in, and the teachers were said that we need to have this blended learning over here, where the teacher teaches in the classroom, there is a camera in the class, and some of the students who are there at the house, they're learning it live from from their homes. So by doing all this, at the same time, you are also evaluating the students. The questionnaire sent to the parents, and also there was a self-assessment for the teachers also, just to understand how well they are educating the students who are there right in front of them, and at the same time, those students who are learning from them. And when we saw the data, we could see that the students who were there in the class and the students who were there at the house in the learning model, so the learning was somewhere in the parallel zone. So the students, they were learning, the teachers were teaching, and at the same time, there were a few hiccups from the parents that we cannot afford this because we have two, three children at house, and everyone needs a mobile phone for their classes. But eventually, parents, they supported us, and matter of fact, a few weeks later, they were really, all the students, they were participating. In the beginning, I must tell you that the participation of the students was very less. Only 20% or 30% of the students were participating, coming online. But later on, what we saw, even if there was a declared holiday or something like due to strike or something, so the students, they were sent this message, and all the students, when we checked the data, when we checked the attendance and everything also, what we found was nearly 80 to 90% of the students, they were coming live, and they were literally learning from the teachers. And when they came back to school, when the government allowed all the 100% students to come back to school, there was an immediate assessment of all the students immediately after a week. And we could see that out of 100 marks or 50 marks, whatever that the mark was, students, they were able to score above 70, above 80, and above 90 in different classes. So this was explained to the teachers that even when you use this thing, technology in the classes also, the students are really learning. And let me just tell this to you right now. As you know, that there is this organization called ASER, Annual Status of Education Report. I'm really not sure how they conduct the assessment of how they conduct the survey in national level about the different state and how many states are performing well in education. So they published that 80% of the students did not know what they learned in online education. But I'm telling you frankly, in such schools, I have seen when the students came back from houses, there was something that already learned that also help the teachers to continue with their lessons. And that's how we brought this thing into our schools. Yes.
Mr. Rathod, your thoughts on the same?
Yeah, Sudhir. Thank you, Sudhir. So, Sudhir, technology and infrastructure and this and that, everything is fine to promote the self-learning. But where the atmosphere come from? See, I tell you, when my daughter Sneha goes for higher study in United Kingdom, and whenever we did a video call, I always saw her sitting in the hostel room and with the book open and doing some work. So I used to ask, बेटा तुम्हारी क्लास कितनी होती है? तुम क्लास तो जाती नहीं हो यूनिवर्सिटी, क्या करने गई हो वहाँ? तो सी said कि पापा हफ्ते में केवल दो दिन क्लास होती है, 1 hour one day and 2 hours another one day. Just because they have to research, they have to self-assess themselves, they have to collect the data, they have to self-study, and the 3 hours class in a week were only for the problem solving, problem discussion with the professors and problem solving. See, in our country, the problem is, every parent, I am also a parent, everybody's parent here. So the parent also want every child to send to the physical, tuition center, or hire some tuition teacher to come at home and give child some class so that the child can score higher. And nothing changed in last 30-40 years. See, when I was in the school, at my time also, not my parent but other parent, most of the parents were also thought कि मेरा बेटा है तो डॉक्टर बन जाए या इंजीनियर बन जाए. And today's parent also want their child to crack IIT examination. So self-assessment, from where the self-assessment environment come? I tell you, in most of the school, I don't know what other people sitting on the panel have experienced, but in most of the school, because I am connected with many of the schools, so most of the schools, their experience is whatever child did in last 2 years is not up to the mark. Self-assessment का तो टाइम मिला था सर उनको, बच्चों को self learning का ही तो टाइम दिया गया था. Teachers were working as facilitator for last 2 years, and the student has to study themselves. And in that case, whatever assessment they were giving online, that those were not fair. So parent need to be involved in the system. Parent need to come forward for this kind of situation to bring into system. Parent should come with the school community, with the teacher community, and parents should ask the schools to develop a model where the self-learning module would be there and research-based learning should be there. And I strongly advocate in all the conferences, see, whatever skill education we are talking about, everything is skill. What is the outcome of education basically? What is the outcome of the education? A child invests some 12, 14 years in the school education just to go into, just to decide which stream he has to go. So in that case, what kind of a skill, not only academic, what kind of a skill a child developed during last, in his 12 or 14 years of schooling, that should be assessed by the child, by the parent, by the teacher, everyone. So this kind of atmosphere we have to create, and this could not be created by the technology only. This could be we can create only by the changing of the mindset of the student. First, mindset of the parent, then the student, then a teacher, of course. So we all together have to come forward to develop this kind of atmosphere in the school, in the society rather. सोसाइटी में ये एटमॉस्फेयर क्रिएट करना पड़ेगा कि बच्चा सेल्फ स्टडी करे, उसके बाद प्रॉब्लम्स लेकर आए, टीचर से डिस्कस करे और उस प्रॉब्लम का सॉल्यूशन मिले. I believe this kind of setup will enhance their learning skills, or whatever skills they have, that will come out of this kind of setup, if we would be able to create in the society. Sudhir.
That, in a way, I think Mr. Rathor and Dr. Amjad, both, you put the ball in the right place. It's a complete transformation of the overall ecosystem. I think that's the need of the hour. It's all the stakeholders who probably need to make their own contribution. It's every parent's responsibility as much as it is of the school ecosystem, whether it is the management or the teachers or the students. The onus lies with each one of us. The idea here is that we need to probably sensitize each one of us and maybe take our own set of responsibilities to bring about these factors and make them a part of the day-to-day execution process. And that is something which is probably going to lead to the change that we are wanting to bring in, with the help of the policy infrastructure, with the help of the school management and their efforts in this. Mr. Francis, I think we are going towards the end of our session. We still have another 10 minutes though, before I open it up to some questions or something. What I'd like you to highlight is Dr. Rathor talked about, bringing about a curriculum 2.0. He talked about certain elements of augmented reality and things like these in the schools that he's running. Do you see any specific such technology tools which are now going to be a part of the education system as we move forward, and which will probably have a transformational effect? I'm talking about tools here. So let's be very specific about some suggestions that we can probably leave our audiences with as to this is what is the right tool for you to, kind of experiment with in your schools.
So you would like me to talk about some tools that we are using in our online learning that we can use in our offline schooling? Is that something that you want me to talk
Not
about?
necessarily online learning. I think we are ahead of the times where we were restricted to online learning. We are back to the schools, but we have the learnings from the online schooling days. So probably, in the days ahead, we can take the advantages of what we've learned in these last 2 years, talk about, something which is probably a blended learning. We've always dreamt of having a very effective flip learning model where the facilitation takes place in the school, but the experimentation happens on the child. Like Dr. Rathor was talking about, that his daughter was assigned the assignments to be researched on your own and then coming back to the school or the educational classroom ecosystem to just clarify or maybe have a brainstorming session with the peer group and learn from each other. So in that sense, what are the tools which one could probably utilize? And like for example, if I talk about my school, so we've taken care of something like a Google Classroom. We've been using it since last 5 years. Not just the pandemic, but the Google Classroom thing has been really an integral part of our system, where the entire school has become a community. So the children are interacting with each other even when they are out of the school campus or the four walls of their classroom. So it's a seamless learning. They're exploring through Google and they're exploring through Discovery and National Geographic and whatnot. So the learning is not just limited to their four walls of a classroom or the syllabus which is there in the textbook. So such tools is where I think I'd like you to throw some lights. If there's something that you've used in your schools or you've come across anything that would be useful for any of the schools to implement going forward. I'll come back to you, Dr. Amjad, after Mr. Francis answers this.
Well, I would ask Mr. Amjad to take over. I'll need some time to frame my answer for this. So I think Dr.
Sure.
Amjad can go ahead. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah. Dr. Amjad, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Francis. Yeah, I'll tell you. 2 years ago, I was part of a company, education management company in Hyderabad itself. That company was managing 350 schools in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. I'm going to talk about the tool. That's why I'm giving you a little bit of background information. So we had nearly 13,000 teachers there. And even before the lockdown, especially whenever the management want to pass this message to the teachers, or the teachers, they want to conduct a motivational session or about anything, okay, to different who are there in different schools in different locations. Even most of the times, the manager asked me personally to talk on particular topics. So going to different schools, is a very big challenge. So instead of that, what we did was we used a tool called Big Blue Button. Even before this Google Classroom, or you say this Google Meet or anything, that Big Blue Button Triple B, that was a platform which we were using, in which all different teachers from different locations, they used to turn camera, participate in this online learning, and there used to be one particular speaker from the central office, from where we used to address all the teachers at the time. So that was a platform, that was a tool which we used. Even the teachers sometimes, especially whenever there were examination, okay, so the head teachers or the expert teachers, they were called to the central office, and from the central office they used to talk and educate the students on important matters related to their examination, how they should be writing the exam, how they should be understanding the question. All such tips were given to the students, especially using this platform from the central office. So that was one thing. Thank you.
Well, I think it's now my chance to speak.
Sure.
Most of the points, Sudheti, you have covered when you spoke about what your school is doing. And another important or a vital thing that we learned during this pandemic was using the tools that we already have to make a learning more wholesome. So we already had an ERP system with us, and we try to leverage that to make learning accessible to our students. So right from providing some PowerPoint presentations to students, to giving links for further research, and then asking them to upload their viewpoints through videos on our own ERP system, that helped us to assimilate the learning or understand how this learning is taking place in that online learning. Now that system could come back to us when we start or plot the way forward, where we give the freedom, like how Minakshi ma'am said, we give the freedom to students to express what they have learned in their own skin. So whatever they are comfortable with. Now, I would not be able to give a particular tool to do this, but yes, whatever tools are available to the school at that point in time, whether it's a Google Classroom or whether it's their own ERP system that they have taken from somewhere, all these things could actually help to take the learning curve forward. Also, the system of self-assessment, the students understanding their own learning, whether they have actually learned whatever or they have actually assimilated what they have learned. So assessments, gamifying assessments, you could use any app or any website for that matter. You could use quizzes, you could use your own ERP system, or you have on quick feedback systems like Mentimeter. So these kinds of tools would go a long way in making the learning that is happening between learning more visible, making the learning more visible in our classrooms, not only if not only when it is online, but also when we bring back students to our classes. So basically, the idea is to use or leverage technology to make sure that the students don't make sure that each and every student assimilates the learning that is taking place in the classroom.
Well, that's again quite insightful, I would say. And before I come to the closing remarks, I believe I have some food for thought to be added to my audiences and, of course, the panelists that you have here. We might just take quick comments from Ms. Meenakshi and maybe Dr. Ramchandra if you be around. So this is one of the experiments that we've initiated in our schools, right? This is coming out of our learning in the last 2 years of teaching methodology that we followed. I think last 2 years, what happened across India is that most of the children, when they were learning online, their learning process was not just restricted to the textbooks that we, are provided to them by schools. Because I, as a personal, educationist, I've always believed that, the textbooks, if we have this prescribed one textbook in a school, that kind of limits the, amount of exploration that a child is subjected to on any particular topic, right? And we, as Credence International Schools, have started with a very novel experiment that we are trying to pivot in our school, which is to probably try and get rid of a one single textbook model from class 5 and above, which essentially means that a child is open to go and study from any possible medium, right? Whether it is internet, whether it is Discovery Channel, Google of the world, and Wikipedias of any of those things. Yeah. So my question to all four of you, anybody can choose to answer. Can you imagine an education system? Can you imagine a schooling environment where a kid is not really prescribed a particular textbook for any subject? We as teachers walk inside the classroom, open up a topic, open the debate, gather what they know about it, leave it to them for them to explore, and then maybe, make the floor open for a very wide discussion. Meenakshi ma'am, I think, is right with her answer. I would love to hear of you.
See, as you said, we ourselves experimented, and being in the Silver Jubilee or celebration, I'm very proud to head the curriculum team where we do not have textbooks right from preschool up to grade 5 level. And whatever you say, the objectives, the learning outcomes, we have mapped it to a larger extent with the requirements of the central board, the state board, the international curricula. I think this was a massive work from a team from our school. I very proudly say there are no textbooks. It is all integrated, transdisciplinary, and somewhere we were able to digitalize now with the pandemic. We have digitalized the resources, and no book is prescribed. And as you say, the best of the eclectic approaches are jotted down minute to minute, so that even for a novice teacher who comes into the classroom, delivering something that is below the standard level of what a teacher's standard should be. I very proudly say we do not have textbooks, and our aim is to only bring in a kite one day or talk with the conversation of the shoes that the child is wearing, and taking it up to relating it to all the dynamisms of the physics, the chemistry, the poetry, the language. That's what I said. The transdisciplinary is followed very well, and even in the training of, yeah, I just want to close it with that. Yeah.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, I was just trying to intervene in between and take a different perspective. So, what I asked you specifically, or what I needed your perspective on is, we all have actually experimented this thing, working without textbooks in the elementary years, from pre-primary to grade 2 and 3. But somewhere I believe in that at that age, and of course we've mapped all those eclectic methodologies. But this is still driven by us and our curriculum team. What I'm looking at is, can we make it student driven where we are textbook less from class 5 and above?
Can I
Where it
answer?
is completely an exploration process for the student.
Can I answer?
Yeah,
No,
please,
I will leave
please.
it to Amjad. I would just want to say one thing. It is always the learner needs, the learner interests that we have to take into consideration even before approaching into a topic. You leave it to them as to what they would like to discuss. And that is the children driven, where you have the caliber to drive them with different discussion points. And the learning becomes, in total, traveling with the students in the learning journey. And it is purely chosen by the students, but ultimately keeping the objectives in mind, that they are not drawn away from the territory, because we need to have a structured learning at some point or the other. Otherwise it will be haywire in not knowing what we are doing. So we have to have some clue in drawing a line or a boundary, but then within that you allow the cows to graze on the green grass so that they get the enrichment. And that is how we should be playing that beautiful role of tortoise like a Krishna, and they all come swinging around you. That should be the role of the teacher, and the students come flocking behind you, and you give them the freedom of differentiation by task, differentiation by performance, differentiation by the time limit, and you have the inclusive education. And if all of us get ourselves trained a little, nothing is difficult. This is my closing remark.
That's quite beautifully articulated. I love the analogy of Krishna. I think you've summed it up around the education world is truly around the, educators who are the harbingers of change, I would say. And very, very beautifully done. Any other closing remarks from any of the panelists? Most welcome. Tarun, would you want me to close it? Do we have any audience
Mr.
questions or
Sudhir.
anything to ask?
No, we can have one remark. We can have one closing remark, in fact.
Sure. Yeah, please go ahead,
I
Mr.
think,
Amjad,
Yeah,
your
Mr.
closing remark.
yeah.
Sudhir.
Yeah,
Yeah,
please, please.
Sudhir, let me just tell you that I really appreciate what you're doing, and it reminded me of those days when I was an educator and I was working at an IGCSE school. And I'm telling you honestly that during that time, even though it was a work given by the school, in class, what I was doing was giving the students an exposure to something which is not there in the textbook and teaching them what is really necessary and what is mandatory to learn, especially in terms of stealing and killing. And apart from that, now the organization which I'm part of right now, so something like that has already started, and I'm looking forward to see something amazing stuff like that what you are been doing there. I'm sure you must have seen the progress, and it's been implemented on regular basis. But we are in like in the first few steps now, so I'm definitely going to give it a try, and maybe we'll achieve it in some time in future, definitely.
Well, I'm sure that
Thank,
experiment would lead to a lot of exploration and a lot of new learnings for the entire ecosystem. Thank you so much on behalf of Elets team. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm sure we've been able to add certain perspective to all the audiences who've been listening to us. Back to you, Tarannum. Anything else from
Thank
your
you,
end?
thank you, thank you, Sudhir. And in fact, it has been wonderful listening to all of you because the kind of perspective you guys have added on to this topic was really, really much needed. And since we're talking about IT and sustainability, that has been very important in the past 2 years. And now we look at, we need to have actual proper digital blueprint for the future ahead. I would now ask my colleague, my backend colleague Sameer, to display these speaker certificates before I say thank you to all of you. Can I have a speaker certificates for all of the people here? Okay, here's a speaker certificate for Mr. Francis Fernandez, Principal Asia English School, Ahmedabad. Thank you so much, sir, for being a part of the event. For Dr. Amjad Razal, Executive Director, Tawheed Group of Educational Institutions. Thank you so much, sir. For Dr. S.K. Rathod, Founder, Chairman, and Managing Director, Sanford Group of Schools. Thank you for being here today, sir. For Mr. Sudhir Kukreja, co-founder, Credence International School. Sudhir, you have been a wonderful moderator, and it has been a pleasure listening to you.
Thank you.
For Ms. Meenakshi Ramesh, Director, Wealth Group of Institutions. Ma'am, it has been an immense pleasure listening to your words today. Thank you so much for being here. I would once again thank all our participants today for sparing some time and being here today for such an important topic of discussion and sharing their views. We have a few stalls out there in the stall area, which where our sponsors are there, and you can have a look at that. And maybe you can, if you want, you can interact with the sponsors as well. We can arrange for that. We have some sessions tomorrow as well. That's the last day of the event, and if you would like to participate or see those sessions and be a part of them, we have a delegate list ready and we have a delegate link as well. Thank you so much for your participation today and have a great day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Pleasure
Thank you
having
so much.
connected with you all. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Really.